Hello, everyone. My name is Abdi Osman, and I'm the volunteer coordinator for the Refugee Education Center. And today we are going to talk about refugee process, which is the Refugee 101. If you have any questions after I go through this training with you, please email me. I'll be happy to provide you any answers with my best. Um, so today, introduction to refugees. So there's a video here which you can watch. I can provide you the link if you're really interested in it. Please shoot me an email and then I can send you that over. So the question today will be, what do you think of when you hear the word refugee? So when you hear the word refugee, what comes to your mind? What thoughts comes to your mind that you start to think of, like when you hear the word refugee? What is it that makes you think if someone says I'm a refugee or someone's talking about refugees? So refugee is a person. Refugee is any person who owing to well-founded fear of being prosecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. We have seen a lot of cases where people have been prosecuted for their race, religion, nationality, and membership of a particular social group. For example, with race, if we go back 20, maybe 30 years ago, uh, the genocide in Rwanda, that was particularly a race thing, which the two tribes were fighting over who's better and who's not, kind of dominating the ones that were smaller in numbers for that race. And then for religion, we can look at Burma, and there were some cases in Burmese government which they pushed the Rohingya Muslims. I mean, it's still happening right now. If you have never heard about it, you can search it. They call Rohingya Muslims. They were a smaller number of Muslims that lived in Burma. They been prosecuted. They've been pushed and beaten and um, kicked out of the country. Right now, they are refugees in refugee camp in Bangladesh, which is um, crazy because someone who was born in that country have a different faith, getting kicked out of their homeland. That is really not something anyone will really expect from their government to do. Um, those kind of things. So yeah, so those are one of the examples that you can kind of see what it is that someone is fearing of. And so these people, whenever um, thinking about going back to their country, they're unable to return because they still have that fear. If the country hasn't been civilized, if the country hasn't come up to an agreement where everyone should be treated equally, no one's really willing to return to their country at that time. So they either get a chance to move to a different country like Italy or US or anywhere else in Canada, could be somewhere anywhere else where they can find find an asylum or a refugee statuses, and they get their citizenship and move on with their lives. Those are the options that they have. Usually people would just say, I'm going to move out of here, I want to get to a different place rather than going back to my country, because they think that will still be hunting them if they go back. So defining an immigrant, a refugee, an internally displaced person, and genocide. So an immigrant is someone who is moving from one country to another country for the purpose of economics. So if a person has a degree in law or a teaching degree, they can freely move from US to Canada, or from Canada to France or Germany or somewhere else freely, and then they can return without having any um, negativity from any social groups or the government, because they are an immigrant, they are not refugees, so they have a choice to go wherever they want to and live there however long they want to. But a refugee, we just discussed that definition. They absolutely have no choice. So they live in a refugee camp. The only hope that they have is moving from that refugee camp to a different country where they can get a proper treatment and start a new life and pursue a career, with the younger kids and parents having to live there, obtaining their citizenships and becoming that country's native. An eternal displaced person is a person who's been moved from one zone to another zone, meaning, if, let's say, for example, there was a chaos going on or a problem going on in Detroit, and the government thinks or decides to move the people from Detroit somewhere else that's safer to keep them there temporarily till whatever it is that's going on in Detroit gets settled. So that's displaced person. So that this person doesn't cross the border of another country. So if the person is coming from Mexico and coming to the U.S., that's an immigrant. If a person is coming from Syria, or if there's any place that has a crisis going on because of war and things like that, that's a refugee. But a person who is just moving from one city to another city within the country, that person we will call them internally displaced person. And genocide, of course, is the intention of massacring an ethnic group, which we've talked about it a little, for the genocide in Rwanda and the Bosnian Civil War, and of course they were talking about what's going on in Burma is considered to be a genocide, and of course what has happened in Somalia too. The civil war that was going on is still going on. Some people might consider as a genocide, some might not. Um, Yeah, so the refugee admission ceiling and refugee arrivals have in the United States since 1980 to 2000. As you can see in the graph, 1990s to 1995, the graphs are a bit higher than the rest of the other. I mean, if you go back to 1980s, that's when we were getting a lot of refugees from Vietnam because of the Vietnam War. And then in 1990 to 1995, we have seen a lot of an influx of refugee arrivals um, from Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Bosnia because of that civil war that was going on. In 2000s, we've been getting quite a number of refugees from Sudan because of the civil war, and then Somalia, and then going forward to 2010, that was the beginning of the Syrian civil war, which is still going on right now. In 2015 to 2019, I mean, we've got a pretty good number of refugee arrivals in from Syria from 2015 to 2016, almost 17. So right now, this is the database we've collected from the United Nations database. 2009 is listed in there, which is really low. In 2020, we haven't really gathered that information yet. It's just because we've gotten some information, which we're expecting to get 18,000 refugee arrivals this year in the United States, but I don't think that's really going to happen because of the outbreak. Our current president, Trump, has been talking about or signed an executive order stating that there won't be any immigrants arriving into the States or any refugees. So I don't think we'll be getting any refugee arrivals or an immigrant into our states. And these are the refugee families and other individuals live in the states. So as you can see, there are lots of Afghanistan in many places. You've got Bhutan, which is Nepal and Burma, and then you got Cuban refugees, and you got the Democratic Republic of Congo, Iraqi, Somalia, and then so on and so forth. Moving forward, so refugee arrivals from 2000 2017 or 2019. As you can see, in 2017, we have had 53,716 refugee arrivals into the States. This was projected to be almost, it was supposed to be double the number that we've received, but it got cut down after the administration has changed. In 2009, we've resettled over 50% refugees population in Michigan, which was great. As you can see in the graph, we're doing pretty good in terms of refugee arrivals by percentage, which is 5. There are lots of refugees. You might not see a lot of refugees in Grand Rapids area or Wyoming or Zeeland or Highland, but there are lots of refugees in Detroit and Dearborn. So what are the odds of a new life? Well, 22.5% refugees worldwide. So since the refugee arrival has been put to a hold or has been decreased from a lot of different countries, the number of refugees in millions have increased. So in a refugee camp, if there were 200,000 refugees right now, if you look at it, there are at least 300,000 refugees. For example, in refugee camp in Kenya, which is Dadaab, northern Kenya, they are hosting a lot of refugees from Somalia, Ethiopia, Congo, and Sudan. There are at least about 500,000 refugees in there right now. So 20% of refugees have been nominated for resettlement and 0.8% have been resettled. This is for last year in 2019. We're still working to get some data information for 2020, but as it looks, it will not be any of these numbers in terms of refugee arrivals. So the percentage of actual resettle will be less than 0.8%. Total nomination percentages will be a lot less than what it says on here, and 22.5%. It will be more because we are not seeing lots of refugees arriving into the state, especially in the U.S. and many other countries. But Canada has been getting a lot of refugees, which is really great. So how do the refugees access to the U.S. Refugee Admission Program, which we call the USRAP? So there are 3 ways where an individual can get access to those programs. So an individual referral by United Nations or any U.S. embassy. So a group or referral where a person claims to be a member of a group of special humanitarian concern to the U.S. and a person who has been resettled to a different state or a country is able to file a petition to bring a relative to reunite where they are, a family, or it could be anyone that's related biologically. So if a person wants to be considered as a refugee, they have to admit themselves into the refugee the refugee programs and admit themselves to the United Nations offices. So a person cannot just go to a refugee camp and say I'm a refugee without having a proper documentation that tells the United Nations organization or the country that the camps have been hosted to know that person is a refugee. So it's more like an ID number. So it's like your identification number to have that proper document. If you don't have that document and all refugees are being moved to resettle to a different country, if you don't have that proper document, the person is most likely not going to be able to get resettlement or any type of assistance. So how do the United Nations protect refugees? Well, they define and determine refugee status. So if you're a refugee, you are a refugee. If you're not a refugee. And refugees have been educated about their rights. So after getting all the paperwork done. The family or an individual gets their documents translated, hopefully to their language, and then there will be a translator that's going to be going over like, okay, this is your rights, this is what you can do, what you cannot do. If you've been persecuted, if you've been treated by that government where the refugee camp is hosted, that person can actually go to the United Nations office and say, hey, my life is in danger, or I've been treated badly. Then the United Nations can step in and say, hey, what are you doing? This is, it's a crime against this individual. So if any individual who experiences their rights have been violated, they can go to the United Nations office and file a complaint. And the United Nations can try to intervene and try to protect the refugees. So the refugee process. This is how it works. So an individual seeks refugee status through the United Nations. We've mentioned that. So if the person comes from a different country and there's a refugee camp and the person goes in there, so they can go and to the refugee office. That will be the United Nations office. So the person can go in there and have their names into the database and their birth date and all that information that they need, and then they'll be provided an ID card with their names on it and their face. A refugee name. So after that process is done, the refugee family names will be entered into the resettlement lottery. So this is by randomly choosing who is going to be resettled. So it's not going to be just, okay, we got you today, we're going to process your information, and then that person gets resettled in the next couple of months or a year. That's not how it works. This is by luck, and when the person's names are entered into that resettlement lottery, it's just by, if the person is lucky enough, they won't be staying in the refugee camp for a long period of time. But then if they're not lucky enough, there are some people who still live in the refugee camps for over 20 years. It's been like over almost half a decade or maybe more. And then after that, the person's names will be picked from the lottery box. And that is when the resettlement process begins. So, and then the screening process and all of that. So the person will be screened, will be questioned, where they came from, what they need to do, where they want to go, and things like that. But sometimes they're not really going to ask the person where they want to go or their desires. It's just sometimes people have no idea where to go, but they just want to get out of there and go to a different place that's more nicer than having to live in a refugee camp in a madhouse that is less comfortable, and lack of employment and things like that. So that is the process, and then the families, they have to go through a lot of different departments. The screening process takes a little bit longer than usual. Right now, they actually they're really strict about it. So if any individual was going through that process, it takes a little bit of time, because the person has to go through 4 different departments. Those are the United Nations departments. If the person, the United Nations says, okay, the United States says, okay, we want to get some more refugees from this refugee camp, then the person has to go through all those 5 departments. So the DHS is one of them, and yeah. So a person, after the screening process is finished, after 1 year arriving into the state, that family gets qualified for a green card, and after they get their green card, the refugee family will be assigned to a caseworker. So there is some agency does all of this in Michigan, Grand Rapids right now. There are some agencies Bethany Social Services and Samaritas. And full access, you can see at the bottom, they are the volunteer agencies that help with resettlement. So when the family arrives here, there are extra helps that they can get through the resettlement with the Bethany and Samaritas. So after the settlement, a social worker has been assigned to the family, and the family will be supported for 3 to 6 months after the date of arrival. Um, and the family is actually expected to be on their own after 6 months. So that means they have to find employment, they have to find ways to get driver's license and buy a car and become more self-sufficient and independent, which is not quite an interesting thing, because if someone is coming from a different country who have no idea where to begin searching for work or getting a driver's license or a car, that will be really difficult for them. So after a year, like I said, the person is qualified for a green card. After 5 years, the person is qualified to get their citizenships. So refugees in Grand Rapids, resettlement agency helps with employment services when a refugee family has been resettled into the states. The first thing the resettlement agency does is they sign a caseworker with the family who's going to help them out with employment, housing, and lots of different assistance that the family is going to need. The school enrollment is what the Refugee Education Center does, which is we go to the families' homes. We do lots of home visits, help families enroll their students into our programs and into the schools. So lots of paperwork and having a translator with us to translate for the families to understand what's really going on. And then after that, we try to show the families or the students schools and train them how to use the public transportation, the busing and all of that. And there is an EL programs for the adults. We've just started doing an EL program for the adults, which is the goal is to get the parents ready to get their citizenships if they have been here in this in the states for a long period of time, 5 years or more than that. Church bases. So these are the groups where they jump in, kind of help families with the services that have been provided to the families if their term is done with the resettlement agency. So, like I said, the families can be with the resettlement agency for 3 to 6 months, and then after that, the families are left alone. So they're on their own. They have to be more self-sufficient, finding work, employment, housing, and other things that they're gonna need. And Social Security, of course, Medicare, food stamp, and things like that. So that's one of the things, some of the things that the resettlement agencies help with families. Yeah. So moving forward, refugees in Grand Rapids. So we have a very large number of refugees in Grand Rapids, but the largest is in Detroit and Dearborn. So we have Burmese families, we have Ethiopians, Bosnian, Eritrean, Somalian, Vietnamese, Bhutan, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Afghanistan, Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, Rwanda, Togo, and Chad. We have all of these individuals in our programs as clients that we serve them. But as far as for Bosnia, we haven't been really getting any refugees from Bosnia. There's been lots of crisis going on in Bosnia right now since the Bosnian Civil War in 1994. So our mission, so where does the Refugee Education Center step in? So our mission, as it says in here, we support refugee in their journey to become fully participating members of the West Michigan community. We envision a thriving multicultural West Michigan community where all have an opportunity to pursue a better future. So supporting families who are coming to this country, and making sure that they are forging a path, they're forging their future, especially the students, giving them the opportunity to graduate from high school and then go to college and become something they've dreamed of, a teacher, a doctor, a pilot, whatever it is that they've been dreaming when they were in the refugee camps. So that's our mission. And then we have these two um, terms that we sometimes try to educate other individuals who are working with refugee families in our communities, because sometimes people try to get that idea of having people wanting to assimilate rather than integrate, but we emphasize the idea of integrating rather than emphasizing, because we want our families, we want our clients to integrate, bring in their culture, their religion, their identity, and becoming fully participating members in our community, not erasing what they are, like their identity, their religion, their culture. We want them to be able to practice who they are, what they are. We want them to practice their culture. We want them to practice their religion. As you can see, there's lots of mosques everywhere. There's lots of temples everywhere. So we want that to be happening in our community. We don't want them to just assimilate, become one culture. Um, and then unique needs is mental health, family disconnect, then academic needs. So the academic needs is what one of our trainers will be going over, and then family disconnect and mental health. So what does the Refugee Education Center does? Well, we provide school liaison services, school orientation, parent workshop, educator professional development, project follow, summer literacy program, hence connected school liaison services is something I've mentioned already, which is the home visits, one-on-one meeting with our families, our clients, kind of educating them about the American school system, the culture, and enrolling their students to the schools and having time to see our programs, how we do things, and what our missions are for them and their students. Um, and then, the parent workshops is having to invite parents over, asking questions, and just kind of going over what the expectation is, what the expectations are, excuse me, from us. What do we expect from parents who enroll their students into a program, so what we need them to do to support their students, the sort of things. Educator professional development is basically what it means is that, we educate teachers in high school, middle school, elementary teachers who have refugee students in their classrooms. And we want to be able to convey that message about how they can try to revamp their lesson plans and curriculum to support the refugee students, so that, they can try to catch up with the rest of the other students rather than making them feel isolated or being left alone. I mean, there are lots of teachers who have not had any experience working with refugee families or any bilingual students from a different country. So this is where we step in and kind of offer these individual teachers some insights, some ideas on how they can help their students in their classrooms. Project Follow services our K through 12 program, which is Monday through Thursday, 4 to 6. So we have that throughout the school year. Then summer literacy program is it runs through the summer. It's a 7-week program which focuses on helping the student to retain the information they've acquired during the school year. So this is open only for students who are struggling right now in the school. And then we kind of go around and see if they can be part of the summer program. And then it also functions as an introduction program, an introduction to schooling for our new arriving students. Hence Connected is our early childhood service. is where we have parents bringing their students, their kids as young as 3 months to 3 months to 3 years. So this is where, parents can bring in their kids. It's more like, babysitting style. Um, so that, the staff in there can take care of their kids and kind of engage in that multicultural atmosphere. We have students that are from like different countries, and just having them to stay there while their parents go out there and take care of their business, and then at the end of the day they will go and get them. So the current Refugee Education Center services Project Follow, has connected high school transition is a new program we just implemented into our organization about a year ago. Last summer we started, and it was very successful. This is focuses on high school students to help them start preparing for college. So the idea is making sure the refugee students are ready after they graduate from high school. So this includes having the students to start looking for college sooner, and applying for financial aid. So any other services that's available or they're eligible to get. Um, yeah, so that is just in a preparation, and having the families to get involved and asking the students, their students a question, hey, what's next after you graduate from high school? What happens is sometimes, these things kind of go fast, and it happens really fast. And when the students graduate, um, you have this, not knowing what to do after they graduate. And we want them to start thinking, earlier, to avoid that from happening. And then we have a family engagement, which is um, the home visit process, and how we communicate families about our programs, how we communicate families about what we are doing as an organization, how we can help them, and the community support kind of goes along with that. There was a link in here. It's kind of just volunteers sharing their experience working with the Refugee Education Center students and families. I can send this to you if you're interested. Again, I mean, I've said many times, if you're interested in some of this information, it's really educational too, but I don't know how to uh, play it out on this presentation. But I can send you the link, and you can watch it if you want to do that. Please let me know. Thank you. Just Abdi Osman, and appreciate you watching this video.